Black man took in a bride rejected at the altar. What happens with this mechanic shocks everyone. The late-night train screeched into the quiet city station. Rain tapped against the iron roof, scattering small echoes across the platform. A young bride in a soaked wedding dress stood frozen under the flickering light, her mascara bleeding into black rivers. The veil hung limp over her face, and her suitcase rested at her feet, half open, clothes spilling onto the wet cement. The crowd whispered. Some pitied her, others judged. But not one person stepped forward. Except him. Darius. A black mechanic in oil-stained overalls, his hands rough, his eyes weary. He was heading home from a 12-hour shift at the auto shop, his toolbox slung over his shoulder. People usually avoided him, not because of the grease or sweat, but because of the color of his skin. In this city, he was just the mechanic. No one cared he was a gifted engineer who could design machines beyond most men's imagination. But when his gaze fell on the abandoned bride trembling in the storm, something in him shifted. He set his toolbox down and approached her slowly. "Miss, you okay?" His voice was gentle. She turned. Her eyes glistened, half broken, half defiant. "He left me," she whispered. "At the altar. Just gone." The silence was heavy. People nearby heard her words, but no one moved. A few even smirked, murmuring, "Serves her right, marrying above her class." Others shot cold stares at Darius, as if questioning why he thought he had the right to speak to her. He ignored them. He extended his jacket. "You'll catch your death out here. Come on, at least sit down." Reluctantly, she accepted. The warmth of the worn leather wrapped around her like a fragile shield. And in that moment, for the first time all night, someone had shown her humanity. But Darius didn't know who she was, not yet. This wasn't just any bride. She was Elena Kingston, daughter of Richard Kingston, the powerful CEO of Kingston Dynamics, one of the largest tech corporations in the country. A man infamous for his pride and his prejudice. And Elena didn't know Darius either, not really. Not the way she would soon discover. Because the man who offered her kindness at her lowest point was not merely a mechanic. He was the very engineer her father's empire desperately needed, and the spark that would ignite a battle between dignity, power, and justice. Sometimes, the people's society looks down on hold the very key to its future. If you believe in second chances, drop a comment below. Your words might inspire someone today. The station cafe was nearly empty, its fluorescent lights humming faintly. Darius led Elena inside, pulling out a chair for her. She sat in silence, clutching the edges of his jacket, her dress still dripping water onto the tiled floor. The waitress glanced at them, hesitation flashing across her face before approaching. "We're closing soon," she said flatly, eyes darting at Darius. "I'll pay," he replied, already reaching for his wallet. "Just coffee. Something warm for her." The waitress sighed, clearly annoyed, but scribbled the order. Elena noticed the way her eyes lingered on Darius, sharp, judging, as though he had no right to even sit in the same cafe with a woman dressed like a bride. Elena leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You didn't have to do this. You don't even know me." "Don't need to," he said simply. "You're hurting. That's enough." Before she could respond, the cafe door slammed open. 3 men in business suits entered, their laughter loud and careless. But when their eyes landed on Elena, their voices faltered. "Elena Kingston?" one of them asked in shock. "What the hell are you doing here, like this?" Elena's lips pressed tight. "Not now, Jared." The man smirked, his gaze shifting toward Darius. "And who's this? Don't tell me, this mechanic is your knight in shining armor?" The others chuckled, cruel and mocking. Darius didn't rise to it. He'd heard it all before. Panic. Grease monkey. But the insults never stopped. But the sting never fully dulled either. Jared leaned down, sneering. "You do know who she is, right? She's Kingston's daughter. And you're," he gestured at Darius's clothes. "Well, you're nothing." Elena's jaw tightened. "That's enough." But Jared ignored her. He spoke louder, ensuring everyone in the cafe could hear. "A man like you doesn't belong at the same table as her. You fix engines, you don't sit with royalty." The waitress returned with the coffee, clearly uncomfortable now. She placed it down but looked at Elena apologetically, as if she were the one out of place for sitting with Darius. Elena's hands trembled around the cup. "Why are you all doing this?" she asked softly. "Because your father would never approve," Jared said with smug certainty. "And honestly? Imagine the embarrassment. His daughter abandoned, only to be rescued by," he pointed again, "someone like him." The room buzzed with whispers. Two older couples at a nearby booth whispered loud enough for Darius to hear. "Shameful, a Kingston girl sitting with? Should have known. That family always gets attention, one way or another." Elena's eyes burned. She turned to Darius, searching his face. But he wasn't angry. His calm unsettled her more than anything. He looked Jared square in the eye. "You done?" The man's smirk faltered. Something in Darius's tone carried weight, steady, unshaken. "I fix engines, yes," Darius said evenly. "But you, what do you fix?" "Nothing. You break people for sport. Maybe that's worse." The cafe went silent. Jared flushed, embarrassed at being challenged in front of others. He straightened his tie, forcing a laugh. "Careful, boy. You don't know who you're talking to." Darius leaned back in his chair. "Neither do you." The words hung heavy. Elena's pulse quickened. She didn't understand yet, but something told her this mechanic was more than appearances suggested. The cafe door opened again. This time, it wasn't random businessmen. It was Richard Kingston himself, Elena's father. Tall, commanding and cold-eyed, he scanned the room until his gaze landed on his daughter, and then slid to Darius. His face hardened. "Elena, step away from him. Now." The cafe air thickened, suffocating. Everyone watched as the powerful CEO confronted the grease-stained nobody sitting across from his daughter. And no one could have predicted how the night was about to unravel. Sometimes silence protects cruelty. If you believe speaking up matters, hit the like button. It lets more people hear stories that need to be told. Richard Kingston's voice cut through the cafe like a blade. "Elena, stand up. We're leaving." Elena froze, caught between her father's command and the quiet strength of the man across from her. Her fingers tightened around the coffee cup until the porcelain rattled. Darius didn't move. He simply met Richard's gaze, unflinching. The businessmen who had mocked earlier straightened immediately, falling silent in the presence of power. Even the waitress lingered nearby, waiting to see what would happen. Elena's voice cracked. "Father, please." "Not here." Richard's jaw clenched. "You think this is about place? This is about dignity. And I will not have my daughter humiliate this family further by." His eyes flicked to Darius. "Sitting with him." Whispers rippled across the cafe again. Some nodded in agreement, others shifted uncomfortably. Darius rose slowly, towering just slightly over the zoo, his hands still calm at his sides. "With respect, sir," he said evenly, "your daughter doesn't need your permission to sit where she chooses." The air crackled. Elena's heart hammered in her chest. Richard's face darkened. "You will address me properly. Do you even know who I am?" Darius's lips curved faintly, not in disrespect but in quiet defiance. "Do you know who I am?" The words startled Elena. Her father blinked, caught off guard, before scoffing. "You're a mechanic. A man who fixes broken parts. Nothing more." For the first time, Elena found her voice. She stood abruptly, slamming her palm on the table. "Enough." Her voice shook but her eyes blazed. "Do you even hear yourself? Look at him. He's the only person tonight who showed me kindness. When my groom abandoned me, when strangers whispered, when even you who should protect me, weren't there, he was." The cafe hushed, stunned by the daughter of Kingston defying her father. Richard's expression faltered, but only for a moment. "You're upset. You don't know what you're saying." "No, father." Elena's voice steadied. "For once, I do." Darius remained silent, giving her space, his presence like a wall behind her words. One of the businessmen tried to cut in, voice smug. "Mr. Kingston, with all respect, she's emotional. Surely, this episode doesn't mean anything." But another voice rang out from a corner booth. A young boy, barely 12, sitting with his mother, stood up. His small fists were clenched, his eyes fierce. "It does mean something," he shouted. "He's right. People like you always act like you're better. My mom works 2 jobs, and people look at her the same way, like she's nothing. But she's not. She's everything to me." The cafe gasped. His mother tried to pull him down, whispering urgently, but the boy stood firm. For the first time, Richard Kingston looked unsettled. His control over the room slipped as murmurs spread. Ordinary people, customers, waitresses, strangers, began nodding, their courage ignited by a child's honesty. Elena turned to her father, her voice trembling but strong. "Do you see? It's not just about us. This is about the way you, your company, your friends, look at people. And it's wrong." Darius finally spoke again, his tone calm, deliberate. "Power doesn't give you the right to decide someone's worth. You asked if I know who you are. I do. But the real question, Mr. Kingston, is do you know who you are without that power?" The CO's jaw tightened, but something flickered in his eyes, a crack in the armor. For the first time in years, someone had dared to hold up a mirror to him. Sometimes courage doesn't come from strength. It comes from speaking when your voice shakes. If this scene moved you, share it with a friend who needs courage today. The silence inside the cafe was suffocating. Rain hammered against the glass windows, like a drum roll for what was about to be revealed. Richard Kingston adjusted his cufflinks, his composure strained but unbroken. "This little display may entertain the room," he said coldly, "but it changes nothing. My daughter will come home. And you," his eyes cut to Darius like a knife, "will go back to the shadows where you belong." Darius exhaled slowly, his patience tested. He hadn't wanted this confrontation. But the arrogance in the man's tone left him no choice. He reached down, lifted his toolbox, and placed it squarely on the cafe table. The clang echoed, drawing every eye. "You think you know me," he said quietly, his voice carrying weight, "but you don't." Richard frowned, irritated. "A box of tools doesn't impress me." Darius clicked the latch open. Inside lay not just wrenches and spanners but detailed blueprints, neatly folded, edges worn from use. Elena's eyes widened as he spread them across the table. "These," Darius said firmly, "are designs your company has been chasing for years. The prototype engine, cleaner, more efficient, stronger than anything Kingston Dynamics has managed to build. I created it." The cafe leaned closer, murmurs growing. Richard's eyes narrowed. "You expect me to believe that? Believe what you want." Darius slid one schematic closer. "But you'll recognize the signature. I submitted this to your engineering board 3 years ago." No reply. "Not because it wasn't good enough, but because my name wasn't the right color for your investors." Elena's breath caught. "You applied to work at my father's company?" Darius nodded. "Twice. Both times rejected without review. And still, your company's latest prototypes suspiciously echo my designs." Gasps rippled through the room. Even Jared, the smug businessman, looked shaken. Richard's face flushed, his composure cracking. "That's absurd. My company doesn't steal." "Maybe not openly," Darius replied. "But someone inside did. And you, too proud to look beyond the surface, never noticed." Elena turned to her father, her voice sharp. "Is it true? Did you even look at his application?" Richard's lips pressed tight, his silence louder than words. For the first time, Elena saw her father not as untouchable but as flawed. The young boy from earlier piped up again, voice trembling with excitement. "Mister, you built an engine like that? By yourself?" Darius smiled faintly. "By myself. Nights after work. Weekends. It's all I've ever wanted, to build something that lasts, something that changes lives." The boy's eyes shone. "That's amazing." The room filled with nods, murmurs of agreement. The tide was shifting. Richard's authority, once absolute, now stood on shaky ground. Elena placed her hand on the blueprints, her voice steady. "Father, you need him. Not just his work. His mind. His vision." She looked at Darius, her eyes softening. And maybe, so do I. The words stunned the cafe. A bride abandoned hours ago now stood beside a man society dismissed, and chose him, not for pity, but for respect. Richard's jaw clenched. You think I'd ever allow my daughter to align herself with? He stopped himself, but the unspoken word lingered like poison. Darius stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. You don't have to allow anything. You only have to decide whether your company survives or collapses under its arrogance. The blueprints glowed under the harsh cafe lights, like proof of destiny. Richard Kingston, father, man of pride, stood at a crossroads. And for the first time, power was no longer in his hands. Hidden talents can change destinies. If you believe no gift should be overlooked, tap subscribe. You might be the voice that helps someone's talent shine. The cafe had shifted. Where whispers of scorn once filled the air, murmurs of admiration now rippled through the crowd. The blueprints spread across the table like a flag of defiance, proof that genius could be hidden beneath grease-stained overalls. Elena kept her hand firmly pressed on the papers, as if anchoring them against the storm of her father's pride. Her voice rang with clarity. Father, you can't deny what's in front of you. He's the engineer your board has been searching for. And you, she swallowed hard, her tone softening, you ignored him because of prejudice. Richard's jaw tightened, but the businessmen at his side were already murmuring. One leaned in, whispering urgently. Sir, if this is true, Kingston Dynamics can't afford to lose him. We're behind on development. Investors are restless. Richard shot him a glare, but the words had landed. Darius didn't gloat. He gathered the remaining schematics carefully, his calm composure making the contrast sharper against the CEO's rising agitation. I don't need Kingston Dynamics, he said, his tone measured. I can take this anywhere. But I'd prefer to see it used where it can help the most. The young boy from earlier stepped closer, tugging at Darius's sleeve. Don't let them steal it, mister. Make them respect you first. Darius smiled faintly at the child. Respect isn't given by others, son. It's claimed by how we carry ourselves. The room fell silent at his words. Even the waitress, who earlier eyed him with suspicion, now looked at him with quiet respect. Elena's eyes glistened. She spoke firmly, then claim it now. Show them your worth is not up for debate. Darius met her gaze, something unspoken passing between them. He straightened, turning to Richard. Here's my offer. You give me the platform to build this, my way. No hidden theft, no buried credit. And you treat every engineer on your floor with dignity, regardless of their skin. Richard's nostrils flared. He was a man unaccustomed to demands, especially not from someone society had taught him to dismiss. Yet the murmur of approval around the cafe was undeniable. The people were no longer on his side, they were on Darius's. Elena added softly, almost pleading, Father, please. For once, see people for their worth, not their appearance. Don't let arrogance destroy you. The CEO stared at his daughter, then at the blueprints, then at the man standing unshaken before him. The reality was inescapable. Kingston Dynamics needed Darius more than Darius needed Kingston Dynamics. The balance of power had shifted. Darius closed his toolbox and slung it over his shoulder. Think carefully. I don't wait for permission to be who I am. I only wait for the right chance to prove it. He turned as though to leave. And in that moment, whispers of awe spread through the cafe like wildfire. For the first time, people saw him not as a mechanic, but as a man of vision, integrity, and strength. Richard's empire trembled, his daughter's loyalty cracked, and the public's eyes had witnessed the beginning of something bigger than all of them. The rising storm was no longer just outside. It was here, and it was about to break. The cafe air still buzzed with tension, but the tide had turned. Darius stood tall, ready to walk away, when Richard Kingston's voice thundered again. Wait! The room stilled. Richard's face was pale, but his tone carried the weight of desperation. You can't just leave. Not after this. Darius glanced back over his shoulder. Why not? You've made it clear what you think of me. Richard hesitated, but before he could answer, one of the businessmen blurted nervously, Sir, the board won't forgive this. If word gets out that Kingston Dynamics ignored and rejected this talent because of bias, we'll lose contracts. Investors will revolt. The color drained from Richard's face. For the first time, the mighty CEO looked cornered. Elena's eyes pierced him. You see? Your prejudice doesn't just wound people, it wounds your company, your reputation. Everything you built could collapse. Jared, the smug associate who had mocked earlier, tried to save face. It's not that serious. But the waitress cut in sharply, emboldened now. Oh, it is. I heard every word you said to him earlier. You laughed at him, mocked him, and humiliated his kindness. People like you should be ashamed. The cafe erupted in agreement. Customers voiced their support for Darius, their anger at the businessman's cruelty. A couple even pulled out their phones, recording the heated exchange. Jared paled. Turn that off. You can't film this. But it was too late. The story was already leaving the room, carried into the world where reputations could crumble overnight. Richard turned on Jared with sudden fury. You fool. Do you realize what you've done? You've embarrassed this company, me. No, father, Elena interrupted, her voice cutting through. You embarrassed yourself. By allowing this kind of behavior. By refusing to see people for who they truly are. The cafe's energy shifted again. No longer just whispers. Now it was judgment aimed squarely at the powerful. Richard's hand trembled as he reached for the blueprints, but Elena slammed her palm down, stopping him. Not until you admit what you've done. Not until you apologize. A gasp rippled through the room. The daughter of Kingston had just demanded public accountability from her own father. Richard's pride battled with the reality before him. His daughter's defiance, his associate's blunder, the public's eyes, all pressed against him like a vice. Finally, through clenched teeth, he muttered, "What was wrong?" His gaze flicked reluctantly to Darius. I judged you unfairly. And he swallowed hard, the words scraping against his pride, I apologize. The cafe froze, stunned. Richard Kingston had never apologized in his life. Darius studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. An apology doesn't erase the past. But it's a start. The crowd murmured approval, some even clapping softly. Jared, meanwhile, fidgeted nervously, sweat dripping down his temple. Richard turned on him like a storm. As for you, you're finished. Effective immediately. Kingston Dynamics has no room for men who drag this company into disgrace. Jared's face drained of color. He stammered protests, but the decision was final. His downfall, swift and public, was complete. Elena watched silently, her heart heavy yet hopeful. Justice had cracked the walls her father built, but she knew the final test was still to come. The punishment had begun, but the true climax, the final confrontation of pride and equality, still loomed ahead. Justice may come slowly, but when it arrives, it changes everything. If you believe truth always wins in the end, hit the like button so more people hear this story. The cafe had become more than a late-night refuge. It was now a courtroom of conscience. The people had spoken, justice had begun, but one last confrontation remained. Richard Kingston stood rigid, his apology still hanging awkwardly in the air. He had fired Jared, admitted fault, but his eyes flicked between his daughter and Darius with a storm he could not control. Elena stepped closer to her father, her voice low but resolute. You've always told me Kingston blood means strength. Tonight, I learned real strength isn't in a name, it's in doing what's right. And if you can't see that, then maybe your empire deserves to fall. Her words hit like thunder. The cafe hushed again. For the first time, Richard looked, not as a CEO, not as a king of industry, but as a father confronted by his own child's truth. Darius, calm as ever, set his toolbox down once more. This isn't just about me. It's about every person you've dismissed, every engineer overlooked, every worker treated as less. You can change, Richard. Or you can watch everything you built crumble. The words cut through his pride like glass. He glanced at the faces around him, the waitress, the young boy, strangers who now judged not his wealth, but his heart. And slowly, his shoulders sank. The mask of invincibility cracked. I don't know if I can change overnight, he admitted hoarsely. I will try. For her. His eyes lingered on Elena, softer now, fragile in a way she had never seen. Elena blinked back tears. For the first time, her father sounded human. Darius gave a single nod. Then that's enough for today. The crowd began to disperse, whispers turning to words of hope. The young boy tugged his mother's hand, beaming. See, Mom? People can change. Elena gathered her gown, stepping toward Darius. You didn't just save me tonight. You showed me what it means to stand tall when the world tries to break you. He met her gaze, a faint smile touching his lips. And you showed your father the courage he needed to see, even if it scared him. Outside, the rain had softened into a gentle drizzle. The storm had passed, leaving the city washed clean. As they walked out of the cafe together, side by side, the image was clear. A mechanic once dismissed, and a bride once abandoned, now walking into an uncertain future, not defined by status, but by courage and dignity. For those who had witnessed it, the night would be remembered as more than scandal or spectacle. It was the night a man's society ignored became the mirror of truth for a powerful family, and the spark for change in a city that desperately needed it. If this story moved you, don't just scroll away. Share it with someone who needs to believe change is possible. Because sometimes, one story can start a ripple that changes everything.